I've got some housekeeping announcements. The July photo of the month winner was Iowa KGB, whose photo was featured on multiple sites. The July photo of the month random prize went to KKD Texas or KKDTX, who won Odyssey Pets Coordinated Product Bundle. The August photo of the month is open for photo submission. Winner gets $50 gift certificate, their choice of sponsor. This month's voter prize is a different Odyssey Pets Coordinated Product Bundle. Upcoming events: Saturday, September 30 at Glass Aquatics in Hurst. It's a gathering and giveaways from 3 to 4 with free giveaways at 4. We're seeking volunteers for Reefa-Palooza, October 7th, 8th, and 9th of this year. That's a weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's a little different than Aquashella. Reefa-Palooza has stricter volunteer requirements, and they also need Friday volunteers. For this year, there's no Reefa-Palooza t-shirt to volunteers, but those that sign up to volunteer early enough can get a club t-shirt, which are much better anyway. And then updated details will be put in the forum general discussion, where a thread has already started for Reefa-Palooza volunteers. Thursday, November 16th is the annual Show Off Your Tank Zoom meeting. So that ought to be interesting. Don't miss that. Saturday, March 9 will be the DFW Club frag swap. Well, that's March 9 of next year. We're really moving forward. Okay. We've got lots of other speakers, events, and giveaways planned. Please check details on the website, in the calendar, and in the forum. Also, please check out and subscribe to the club YouTube channel. That's www.youtube.com/@DFWMAS. I guess I really didn't need to say all that. To see lots of fun events, and there is also educational training offered by many of the club's past guest speakers. A lot of cool videos. So I want to turn this over to Roger, but before I do, I want to remind everyone that at the very end of tonight's Zoom meeting, there is a giveaway of products donated by CTIM. Includes, I think, some frag glue, cleaning pads, that kind of stuff. There you go. Lisa's showing them. But you must be present at the end of the Zoom meeting to win. So if you want your shot, you got to be here. So Roger Vitko of TUNZE USA has graciously agreed to talk to us tonight about what's going on at TUNZE and some of the new products that they've developed. But before I kind of give a little background on Roger, I thought I would talk just briefly about the history of TUNZE and just hit some of the high points, because it was really the first major aquarium equipment manufacturer in the world. It was started by Norbert TUNZE in Munich in 1960, where he developed the first in-tank circulation pump. Now we call them power heads or propeller pumps, that eventually became the Turbell line of pumps, which still exist today. In 1963, TUNZE developed the first skimmer with its own air production. Didn't need another external source of air for it to work. In 1968, they developed the first consumer-grade electroconductivity meter for measuring EC in seawater. The early 70s saw them expand their production facilities in Bavaria. They kept on developing products worldwide. In 1989, they developed the first consumer CO2-based calcium reactor. In 2002, they developed the first consumer propeller pump, which was a huge advance in water movement technology. So they continue to evolve their products. They're still one of the world's foremost aquarium equipment manufacturers, with roots about as far back in the hobby as it gets. In some of TUNZE's developments really make the hobby possible, or certainly made advances in the hobby possible historically. So enough about TUNZE. Let's talk about Roger. Roger is an owner and a director of TUNZE USA, which is the US-based TUNZE entity. He's been involved in the aquarium hobby since you were 8 years old, Roger. Is that right?
Yes. So that's 40 years now.
Wow. Been here a long time. I think he started in freshwater, and that's still a core interest of his, but he, of course, has maintained and maintains reef aquaria. Just a great guy and hobbyist. He started TUNZE USA along with the global TUNZE entity to be the exclusive distributor and service center for TUNZE in the US in the early 2000s. Really interested to hear what he has to say about TUNZE's new products. Roger, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I mean, I'll apologize up front. I'm fairly tired. We moved to our new warehouse May 1st. It's been I guess you could call it a misadventure. When it was supposed to be ready May 1st, I moved into what was essentially a metal shell with no electricity, no plumbing, no, and we had to make the best of it. For a month, we had to work out of pallets because we couldn't unpack anything because they were still running skylifts around and putting up lighting and doing all sorts of wiring. We got to June, we were able to set up our racking and put stuff away. I've only had this office with air conditioning for 2 weeks. It's just like up there, it's 110 degrees today, and the majority of my work is warehouse work, packing orders. So it really takes it out of you. I generally start here about 6:37 in the morning to try to dodge as much of the heat as I can. And so I'm honestly usually winding down for bed at this point. But it's I'm very happy to be here, and we have a lot of new stuff coming out and some things that have already been released, and so I wanted to share some of those with you. It'll kind of be a mix of sharing my screen and products I have by myself here. The first one, this is something that's really new, and I think everyone probably knows the stream pumps, the 6105, 6255. Well, this happened before COVID. We hired an engineer that used to work at Airbus, and he was in charge of turbine design. And so we asked him, what can you tell us about propellers and that we can optimize the efficiency? And so this is the typical 6105 propeller. It's 46 millimeters across. This is the new one that he came up with, and it's fairly remarkable. It cuts the noise by 10 decibels, and it cuts the power consumption more than in half, and we get the same flow rate. One thing, though, that does change is the flow pattern, because with a conventional propeller, you're actually propelling a bunch of ribbons of flow across the tank. And some of our competitors, we noticed this when we were studying pumps, that you could actually see this. If you put streamers or something in the tank, you could see that you had a point of flow over here, and then it rotated and it was over here, because you were literally shooting a ribbon across the tank instead of a tube of water. On our pumps, we figured out that why that doesn't happen is we have that snout coming off the front, and that funnels those ribbons together into a tube, but it's still not terribly efficient. With this, you cut through the water more evenly. There's a steeper angle to this, which is also part of it, but it's propelling the water much more smoothly and in a more linear pattern, and so you don't have that ribbon. You literally get this tube of flow. The new 6105, you can actually upgrade the pumps you have. These are early sample versions, but the pumps will be out in September, and the new 6105s will be only 12 volts and use 11 watts. And the 60, and if you have a 6105, a current one, and you put this propeller on, you'll essentially have upgraded it to a 6255. It'll be doing about 4,400 gallons an hour. So that's one thing we've been working on. I'll switch to sharing the screen now so you can see a picture of the pump. Well, apparently there's some system preference stuff I got to do, but let me see if I can do this real quick.
And Roger, I can edit this. And so this whole part, I can just cut it out, and in the recording, one will even see it. So no worries.
Well, unfortunately, it's telling me to make this change. I got to quit and rejoin. So I guess we'll forego that. But there are pictures of it on Reef to Reef. Actually, we have one as a raffle prize right now for next month.
You know what? I was looking at that pump today because I have a Peninsula, Roger, that I'm having a hard time with flow.
Okay.
And that was the only thing that I could see that would basically reach from the opposite end of my return.
How big, how long's the tank?
It's 62 inches.
That might work. So, you know, my older tank, I had a 215 that was 72 inches long. And I found no matter what I did, no matter what pumps I tried, the flow on that last foot was basically, you were in mushroom xenia territory.
It would just fall.
Yes.
And I get a lot of dead spots on that end, and I can't get a pump that will. I've tried jars, 14K, that still couldn't get that far down.
Yeah, I mean, what I ended up doing was I compromised and I put a 6055 in a nano stream rock and just kind of hit it in the rock work there. But it's not perfect because you still have a cable coming up. So
you know what? I'm okay with cables.
you know, that was my solution, but my tank was 10 inches longer than what you have. It may well work.
Yeah.
My current tank's 7 feet long, and after that one experience with a Peninsula tank, I was like, I'm not doing this again because somehow I got flow on the other side. So now it's just a plain back against the wall tank. So
right. So it blows me away because you see all these Peninsula tanks, especially the tanks coming out of China.
Yeah.
Those guys with their
what I usually see people do, like when I see professional maintenance companies put in Peninsula tanks, there's usually some sort of big closed loop return hidden in the gravel line on the other side.
Right.
You know, so they usually have some provision for flow on the other side, but it is really tricky. I mean, it's hard to figure out a way to do that where the far side of the tank isn't going to be narrowed down to just a few euphyllias, mushrooms, stuff that likes that low flow. And even then on that, you tend to have low enough flow that you get algae problems on that far side.
Right.
So, you know, the pump, the picture on Reef to Reef only shows the one flow housing. It just like they come with now two, you'll get two. One will be narrower and let you focus that flow a little bit more. So I would imagine, especially the 6255 would reach all the way across with that narrow housing.
Okay.
So the next thing I had to discuss, and I mean, this will be mainly something for people with smaller tanks. We used to make an aquarium fan called the Aquawind. And the original Aquawind was nothing more than a fan that was made for gaming laptops. And we modified it by adding a clamp and providing a power supply. And it was a pretty big success. We were surprised, but the fan had its issues because it was made for computers, as most fans are. When we saw that there was a market there, we went back and we developed this fan from scratch that everything it's not waterproof, but if it were to fall in briefly or get splashed or sprayed, it would survive it. And it's designed so that if you clamp it on your tank, the flow comes out in a blade. And the reason that's important, this fan isn't terribly strong. So that's one thing. I had a guy buy one for a 265-gallon tank and rant and rave about how it only took off a degree of temperature. It's like, fans are for like 75-gallon tanks tops. This is,
Right.
you're in a chiller territory. So it's like, but anyway, the fan does about 60 CFM, and the main way that we magnify the efficiency is that you're blowing the air in a blade, and what insulates the water is that it's just like insulation in your house. You have this cloud of water vapor on the tank. If you can shear that away from the surface, and it's just weak hydrogen bonds holding that water vapor there, then more water can evaporate, the heat can escape, and you cool the tank. But these are out now, and the main thing I'd say about it is extremely quiet. We don't build motors of this type. I mean, our pumps, we wind the motor coils in that, but an air-cooled motor like this is not something we do. We source this motor from Korea, so it's a very high-quality motor. It is sealed up, has a very high-quality bearing, and we make the housings and assemble everything at our factory in Germany. So it also runs on 12 volts, so if it falls in, you're not going to get electrocuted. The last thing, this is also, I plan to share pictures without realizing that that's a setting I have to make, and that the only way for me to do that is to disconnect and come back. The osmolator is probably our most famous product, and it's always come with this little pump.
Yep.
And this pump is a DC brush motor. So all that's in here is basically the same motor that you might have done used as a kid in a science project, a little 9-volt motor. The shaft goes through a seal, and that's turning an impeller. And that's actually the way a lot of the ATO pumps on the market work. And this style of pump is essentially what's used to run the windshield washers on your car.
Cars.
So it works well if you're using, it'll last a long time if you're just using it every few days for a few seconds, but they don't last terribly long. They're not that durable. They do eventually fail. So probably 5 years ago, we set out that we were going to build a pump to do this job, but it's a pump we need tens of thousands of a year to keep up with the osmolator, and we're a very small family-owned company. So everything had to be designed to be durable, simple to make, and inexpensive. And this is the end result is we have this pump that it now uses a standard impeller that you can remove and clean. It uses push fittings. So instead of the cumbersome reducer fitting we used to have, now it just is a standard push-in like an RO fitting. We used a very high quality cable. This cable is actually made in Germany out of polyurethane, so it's a very durable cable. And you can service it by just removing this front cover that just screws on with 4 T10 screws, T10 torque screws. A big advantage of this pump is it can actually pump up over 20 feet. Doesn't come into play much in Texas, but one of the main things that people in northern states always ask me is they'd like to have their reservoir in the basement and be able to pump up to their tank. And this pump can actually do that.
Wow. That's quite remarkable.
Yeah. And so that was kind of the basis for the new osmolator. And the new osmolator we've shown on Reef to Reef. We have a thread about it. Those are actually coming out very soon. It'll be called the Osmolator 3. And the reason for that is it is really the 3rd generation of osmolator. The first one came out in '86 and used 2 float switches. Then in 2001, we introduced the model with a optic sensor and a float switch as a backup. And that's currently what we produce, even though it's had a few major revisions since. The new one uses a very large optic sensor. And the reason for that is with a bigger field of view, if some calcium builds up on it, if it gets scratched or damaged in any way, it can still detect the water level because we've got a much bigger surface area to detect that water level. and the backup is a thermal sensor. So there's a heater and it heats up a little sensor. If that sensor is losing heat because water's at it, it knows that the water level is too high. And so everything's solid state. There's no float switch that can be affected by a magnet like on our old model. The other thing is it's extremely compact. Everything's built on, if you're familiar with our nano streams, the magnet mount that holds a nano stream, that small round magnet, all the sensors and electronics are incorporated into that magnet. So you don't have all these wires. There's one wire that comes from it. That wire splits into a Y, one's for power, one's for the new pump. And that should be out probably around the end of next month.
Awesome.
And, besides that, we've done a lot of work on just general safety, power supplies. We used to use more or less the same power supplies as everybody else. We then we hired a guy to just look into safety regulations around the world. And he found that the European law was a little bit vague and everybody else had just been using. So there's one law says that if you're using a power supply by a pool or a pond, it has to meet this level of water resistance and safety. If you're using it in a household, it has to meet this other level of safety. Well, everyone in the aquarium industry went with, well, it's a household electronic.
Right.
And we were like, but not really. It's closer to the pond or the pool scenario. So we asked them for clarification, and then they came back and they're like, yeah, you're right. Everyone really needs to meet this standard, but because we didn't have that written down, we're giving everyone a few years to catch up. But the new power supplies are now so most power supplies, everybody knows, are made in China.
Jabo.
These
The
power
worst.
supplies this is the OEM that Bosch and a lot of big power equipment companies make.
Yeah.
And this is from Vietnam. It's made to a much higher standard. It's actually what they term a hospital grade power supply. It has to have a very specific degree of voltage regulation and safety. And these are the power supplies that come with the Aquarium. They'll come with the next oscillator, new power heads. They definitely cost more, but they should be far more durable and they are a lot safer. If they get wet, they shut down, they don't catch fire. They have all sorts of fuses and safety circuitry inside.
Awesome.
And then now we're getting into more boring stuff. We have new coral glues, and essentially these I hesitate to mention because as much as they're interesting, this is the same thickened super glue that almost everybody else sells. It just comes in a fairly large tube and it's at a fair price. Then we have Coral Gel Duo, which actually is an interesting product. It's a two-part type of super glue. And what I find particularly interesting about it is it cures up. So it comes in a system similar to how you usually buy epoxy. And there's these mixing needles that go on it. And it sets up very quickly, but it sets up so that it's rubbery. And so things can still flex and sway. And it can also be mixed and applied completely underwater. So this product, I think, is unique.
Yeah.
Hey, Roger, so that's a super glue, a crino acrylate?
It is, but it's a two-part.
And did I understand you right to say that even once it has dried all the way, there is still flex to it?
Yes, it sets up almost
Like a silicone almost? or-
exactly, but not
Okay.
quite that degree of flexibility.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to describe. It would be like it kind of like what I would call, if you've had a tube of epoxy that sat in the garage too long and doesn't quite cure all the way and stays kind of rubbery. That's kind of what this sets up like.
So
So
it
it's not-
basically gives your corals enough chance to encrust.
Yes.
So urchins and that don't come along and just plow it over.
Right. And I think the main advantage is that you can do everything underwater. Now you do, it comes with a few of those mixing tubes. But you do generally lose the tube because of the glue that cures up inside there.
Right.
So.
But does it allow you to clean it?
Well, you would, I think you would essentially lose the mixing tube in the process. You get, I believe it's you get 5 of the mixing tubes.
Okay.
So you'd have 5 chances to use it, but you'd have to throw these tips away after every use. You lose one of the tips.
That's for big time fraggers.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time like gluing things like Euphilia and stuff like that, using just like cyanoacrylate. So I've tried using that 2-part, the 2-part that you buy in a tube. That stuff still is kind of hard to use. So would that combined with that give it more of a foothold, you think, than just using cyanoacrylate glue?
Well, I would probably use this standalone. I mean, are these euphyllias that I take it they've got a pretty good skeleton that you're gluing the skeleton to?
Right.
My experience, so epoxy, epoxy's most of those 2 parts. And I like epoxy for under ledges or something that you really need it. Like if I'm sticking a dendro upside down in a cave, I would only use epoxy for that because it's the only thing that'll really hold like rock solid. We have another glue, our Coral Gum Instant, which is actually dental impression putty. And it works being dental impression putty, I'm sure we're all familiar with that. They stick it on your teeth. It kind of sticks, it kind of hurts a little and they have to pull, but it comes off. It works the same way attaching a coral. The secret is that if you embed some of it, so if you start up with a big enough glob and you put it on a piece of rock that's really porous, once that rubber gets pushed into those pores and it locks in there, and if it's kind of wrapped around the base of the coral, you almost create like this puzzle lock that it's not really glued, but it's locked in place because its material's there. And it's also fairly rubbery. That works pretty well with euphyllias, at least in my experience. If the skeleton, you need to have a skeleton that has some sort of flare at the base. Because if it's conical and if it's like an inverted cone, there's nothing for that glue to really grab onto and it'll just detach. The Coral Gel Duo, I honestly have not used it yet. So I've only seen everything from the factory. I think it would work. It sounds like it would match what you're trying to do, but I'd probably try if this coral skeleton has any sort of flare, I would probably just try the Coral Gum Instant, because that's that dental impression putty. And one big advantage of that is there's no reaction in the tank whatsoever. Your skimmer doesn't freak out. The corals don't close up. Epoxy, you always have that reaction from everything in the tank.
Right. Yeah.
You're up a skimmer.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, because I just cut up a bunch of torches and I was, gluing for hours and just getting frustrated.
Yeah.
So I just ended up with a hand covered in super glue, basically.
Well, honestly, before I've always had reasonable luck with the Polyp Lab glue. Did you try that one, the Polyp Lab super glue?
No. I think I just got like the thick stuff from BRS, the big one.
Yeah,
like 10-ouncer.
I use that brand they sell as that Glue Smith, and I keep that around the house for repairing stuff. But I never found it worked that well for corals. And the Polyp Lab stuff, he did something different with his formulation where it cures a little bit slower. You have just a little bit more time to work. And it doesn't react so much with water. It stays kind of like a gooey gel. You know, most super glue, once moisture hits it, that's it. It's set. And
Yeah,
I think
once you
that's
put
where
it,
a lot
yeah.
of the problem it comes in.
Sometimes once you
might-
put it in, oh, sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was like that super glue. Once you put it in salt water, it like forms some a skin,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't want to adhere to anything. So it's an
I
issue.
mean, you might, you know, a lot of stores sell the Polyp Lab glue, and a lot of times they, you know, Polyp Lab sells it to the store in this jar, and it's usually like $2 or $3 for a little tube out of the jar. It's usually something I have at the counter. You might try that.
I've seen it. I've just never tried it. I've always been a super glue.
Yeah. Their formulation is, there's something different about it. I can say that from experience. There's more than hype to what theirs is.
Interesting.
But
Yeah. Awesome.
I really like your powder blue.
Oh, thank you.
I used to have one, and it died when I moved houses 4 years ago. And
Yeah, he's the
I replaced it with an Achilles, which I really like, but that rules out ever having a powder blue again. So,
yeah. Well, I don't know. I'd rather have an Achilles probably, but yeah, that powder blue, he's the tank boss.
yeah,
He keeps everybody in check.
that's a nice tank.
Thank you. Thank you.
How big is it?
150.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Old Oceanic.
They don't make them like they used to.
No, they don't. I really wish they did, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's you look at some of the glass nowadays, it looks a little sketchy. It's pretty much you got to go custom if you want something well made.
Planet tried.
Yeah,
They're still trying.
Planet, their aquariums look nice. It's just I go to the stores around Austin area and everybody sells, well, those cage tanks, they're really nice, but they're really expensive.
Exactly.
And the other ones I see are there's a brand from Taiwan they tend to sell that they look nice, they have really nice mitered edges, but they don't build anything bigger than about 120 gallons. So
Oh, wow. Water box is another one that's really nice.
yeah, we don't have those at any of the stores around here.
But they're also their prices, but
Yeah.
the way that they build their tanks, I've never seen anyone build the way they do for their corners. How they bevel, they take that little piece of glass
Uh-huh.
and place in the corners whenever they silicone. Where
Yeah,
it's in that
well,
corner.
the funny thing, I think who invented that was there was that guy in he's still around, Felix Borden.
Okay.
And he's a custom tank maker outside of Miami or Orlando.
Yes.
And he was the one that I think invented that. They call it armored corners.
Yes. So you don't have to worry about destroying your caulk or nothing.
Yeah.
The silicone is protected.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's just like the other ones. They're a little pricey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. It is turned out to be.
I think we just lost Drex.
It happens.
Before you came on, Roger, he was talking about his internet connection, and my gut says he just doesn't have enough bandwidth there.
There he is. He's back.
There he is. Yeah, he's not really back.
No.
Well, so Roger, what do you see being the sort of the next,
Over COVID.
looking down the ramp, the next 5 or 10 years in terms of the marine aquarium hobby, just from an equipment side, where do you think most of the development or advances are going to come from?
It's hard to say. I get the feeling that we're on the brink of and I think in a lot of countries, especially Europe, it's probably already here, a fair-sized economic downturn. And, what tends to happen then is a lot of the smaller companies that invent stuff go out of business or they merge and they get bought up.
Yeah.
And, that tends to, without competition, you tend to stifle a lot of the innovation. And a lot of what I see that's disturbing is that you pretty much just have a company comes out with something, but it's not really anything new at all. They just bought it from the original Chinese manufacturer that everyone else was buying it from and put their brand on it or put their new spin on it. And that's not really going to move anything forward either. So I don't know, I mean, on the one hand, you could say that all the fundamental stuff has been invented. How much more, you can kind of polish things, polish up dosing systems, calcium reactors, refine things to work a little better and be a little bit easier. But I think that, I hope that we'll be a big part of it. I know we have a big pipeline of products, and, we got really sidelined by COVID. Being in Germany, we had 4 months of lockdowns, and then on top of that, we had all kinds, after lockdowns ended, everyone had to be 6 feet apart. It's very hard to run a factory that way. You had to have all sorts of airflow measures, masks, gloves. And then, there was the electronic shortage was a big problem too. But we're finally this year back on track, and things that we started in 2019 before COVID are finally coming to fruition. And we do have a new controller that'll be cloud-based that's coming out. We're working on a new generation of stream pumps. Skimmers should be starting to get updates next year. But those aren't breakthroughs. Those are polishing the edges of technology that's already out there. And I don't know, a lot of people say everything we need's already been invented. There's nothing big left to invent. We always talk about the wave box. When the wave box came out at Interzoo, it was like stole the show. Everybody was in awe over it. I think we got the best new product in pets that year. But at the same time, it's like we always talk about, you're never going to have that glory again. That was like you invented something that had never been seen or done before, but now all the flow stuff's pretty well done. Propeller pumps. So you can do stuff like this new propeller and a new controller and quieter motors and that, but will there be anything that totally revolutionizes it? I don't know.
I don't know about that. They basically done everything. Germany led technology in our hobby for years.
Yeah.
You guys are still far more advanced than what we are, far as tech-wise.
I mean, a large reason for that was that in a cold climate like that, people want something natural in their house because they're trapped in their house so many months out of the year. And so aquariums are a huge, hobby in Germany and a lot of Europe. But, that will probably change to some extent when you have 35 cent a kilowatt hour electricity like they do now. And so those kind of changes might, and then, as I was talking to Murray on the phone before I got here, and, just the temperature in the Atlantic. I mean, right now, Florida's 100 some degrees.
Yes.
There's a lot of concerning things about the direction of the hobby that you can always have hope that, we're a fairly smart species. We tend to solve problems, but you have to have the will to solve that problem.
Right. Exactly. I've heard that speech many a times at MACNA.
Yeah. Well, I try to not be the gloom and doom speaker, and I think that the hobby is in a good place overall. I think a lot of new people came in. We saw that during COVID. It was the just crazy demand for everything. But I'm not always convinced that's a good thing. A lot of people, this is a hobby that fundamentally you have to have an interest in nature and a high degree of patience. And if you don't have that, you're just not going to last.
No.
And so that
And money.
help us.
You need some money too.
Yeah, that too.
Well, it's getting that way.
So I hate to do this. I don't want to sound, I want to play devil's advocate here for a minute and go back to what you had said about you guys are coming out with your own controller, you say?
Yeah.
So my question is, why do all the manufacturers have to have their own controller? Why can't they just make products that integrate with controllers that are already out there? I mean, I'm talking like Hydra, Neptune.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair question. A lot of the reason is that, so our new controller will be very open to connecting to just about any product that's on the market. It just has 0 to 10 volt output. It connects to our pumps. We've integrated it with Kessel. We've tried to make it a fairly open controller. A lot of that is that the companies that make controllers, they tend to, there's some degree of dictating, you're going to do it our way, and we're not,
Yeah, that's my point. That's my point.
And then on top of that, it's like, oh, and by the way, we're also going to make a pump, and so we're going to compete with you on your key products. And it's like, well, then why are we going to work with you? So, yes,
Are giving up their side of technology. That may be something they don't want to reveal.
Yeah. All I know is on our controller, it is possible for any company to interface with it. And we've tried to make that as open and as available as possible. I don't think that competition is necessarily a bad thing. The two things that we don't want to do as a company is have things where you need an app, you've got to give up a bunch of personal information to get the app and connect to us. We want to keep a level of that it's simple, you have privacy, we're not looking to get your name on a list and sell to you. And then the other thing that we would want is that that we're not building an ecosystem that only works with our products, because we don't make every kind of product you'll need. And if you may have a very large tank or very specialized tank where a return pump we make isn't suitable for you, but you can use our power heads or you can use some part of our system. So, our power heads interface with other controllers that are on the market, and our controller will make it so it'll interface with other pumps that are on the market. But there are companies that you see that they're building this very tight ecosystem that nobody else's stuff will work with. And who knows? I mean, that's worked for Apple, that's worked for other companies. Maybe that's the way to go, but it's not the direction we want to go.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Because I have basically started researching you guys.
Oh,
Yes.
Preach, Roger. Hell yeah.
so,
Ever since I've heard that we were doing a Zoom with you guys, I'm just like, okay, I need to jump into TUNZE. I need to see what they're about, because what I'm using is not happening for me.
Let's get the correct pronunciation of the name. Is it
TUNZE.
well, so the
TUNZE?
Germans say TUNZE, just like
TUNZE?
Porsche or Miele. The accepted English pronunciation is TUNZE, just because
TUNZE.
by our grammar rules, that's roughly how it would be said. So
Tunze, I'll do it. That's cool. It sounds a lot better.
I just never knew how to say it. You know, there's like Kate Comer, they have the Comer dosing pumps. How do you say those? You know,
Yeah,
I'm sure
the
it's not tunes.
Tunze.
our company, the founder was Norbert Tunze,
Tunze.
and he had a so he had an interesting story. He had an electrical repair shop in Germany that he'd run through the 50s, mainly did radio and TV repairs. And a guy came in one day with an Eheim pump. Eheim used to be a toy manufacturer, and they made pumps for model railroad sets so that you could have a little waterfall or something, you know, water powered on your train set. And those pumps, like every pump made before then, was designed so the water came in the bottom and came out the top. Well, after he repaired it for the guy, he tested on his aquarium. And he's like, my fish they love this thing. And before that, all we had were air pumps. And so he had this idea, what if I could change this pump so the flow came forward and I had a real power head? And then, you know, he played around with it and he developed it and got the patented it. And that was pretty much the founding of our company.
Interesting.
That's cool.
That is awesome.
And to this day, it's still family owned, right? So
Yes.
Alex-
Now, so when I started, Norbert was still alive. He was retired, but would still come in now and again. Axel was just becoming the main everyday manager. And now Felix is the everyday manager, and that's Axel's son. So we're on the third generation.
That's getting rare, more and more rare, you know?
Oh, yes, for sure. Because nowadays kids just seem to want to go their own way.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be working for what I've seen. You know, with building this warehouse, I mean, it's just interesting. All the people I've talked to, you know, there's the guy that installed our septic system. He said he graduated with a degree in civil engineering. And he's like, now what am I going to do? And some friend of his said, install septic system. He's like, that sounds gross. He's like, what are you talking about? You're installing a brand new clean concrete tank. He's
Right?
like, you just design it and set it up. And so he's like, you know, he said, I work for myself. I don't have to answer anybody. Yeah, I got to go before cities and counties and get permits and that. But for the most part, and he said, most people nowadays, they never even think of a career path like that. But he's like, I'm a happy man. I've got a nice house. It's worked well for me. And there's just, people don't realize that all the things you can do in life besides just working in an office somewhere and getting thrown out when you get too old to be of use to them.
Right.
Well, Roger, we really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I don't have any more questions. Somebody else may have some more questions. I do need to bounce though, and thank you so much for doing this. We really, really enjoyed it. It's very important.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I'm sorry if we got off topic a few times, but it was nice to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
It was great. And thank you for your continued support of the club.
Thank you.
So you guys got to be at Reefapalooza?
Yes.
Awesome.
I'm doing Reefapalooza Dallas this year. I'll be there.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, I'll be definitely at your booth.
Well, it'd be good to see you, Drew.
Yes, sir.
So I do own a refugium light. I did buy the Tunze underwater or the submersible light that you guys have. I love that thing. It works great. So I'm just
Thank
going to
you.
say it now.
Well,
Awesome.
that magnet that's on there, that's the same size magnet that the new oscillator. That's the controller. It's just
It's a strong magnet. Yeah, it's pretty strong.
So,
Interesting. Because I have a new friend that's up at, well, the guy that lives up in the outskirts of Austin. He's just basically setting up a new 200 Peninsula.
okay.
And he was talking about those lights. And
Yeah,
he's
they're
just like-
nice.
he
For the
said, "That's what
price?
I'm doing." That's what I'm doing in my sump. He said,
Yeah.
instead of putting lights around my stand underneath, he said, I'm just putting those lights in my sump and have them illuminate up. So pretty awesome.
Well, thank you.
So
Well-
I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do the drawing. And then, so someone must be present to win, and I see that some snuck on, so Jay, I see you. Oh, you're in here. Then you're welcome to stay and visit and socialize. But before I do this, does anyone have any last questions for Roger that we want to get as part of the recording?
Now he basically answered mine.
Well,
Oh,
Roger,
yeah,
thank
I'm
you
good,
so
thank you.
much. I so appreciate you coming and sharing and your generous donations of goodies to the club. These products have been wonderful. And it's, if you've watched the different things as we've recorded them in YouTube, it's also been an educational opportunity of your company, of your products, and we're helping to get the word out. So thank you, thank you. So I'm going to shift gears. You must be present to win. This evening, though, we are doing a CCAM raffle giveaway. Later on this year, we have some more TUNZE products that you'll see. But tonight is a duo cleanser pad, a CCAM cloth, and a glue. Not the really cool glue Roger was talking about, which I'm thinking that we're all going to be running out there and trying. So must be present. I had to dig around. Everything that's here in my office also turns out to be wet. So it must have something that's flying in here. Stuff in. And the winner is Jay.
Yay!
Jay.
All right.
Congratulations, Jay.
Contact information. So hang on. I don't want to get it on the recording, and I'll give you my contact information as well.
Okay.
So cool. And I think we lost Roger. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.